All right, let's get right into it. Today, we're stepping into the ring with two of the absolute heaviest hitters in literary history, Leo Tolstoy and Fyodor Dostoevsky. These guys were the twin towers of Russian literature, but their views on life, God, and humanity, well, they couldn't have been more different. So let's settle in for a real literary showdown. So here's the crazy thing, the central mystery of it all. Both of these men lived around the same time, often in the very same city, St. Petersburg. Dostoevsky was supposedly pretty keen to meet, but Tolstoy just wasn't having it. They had mutual friends, they moved in the same circles, and yet they never once, not a single time, came face to face. It's got to be one of literature's greatest misconnections. And this is where it gets truly heartbreaking. Tolstoy only seemed to realize what he'd missed out on after Dostoevsky died. He wrote this in a letter, and you can just feel the regret, calling Dostoevsky a friend he just hadn't gotten around to meeting yet. It really captures this deep, unspoken respect they had for each other, even from a distance.
Okay, so to really understand their differences as writers, you have to start with their lives. And wow, what a contrast. Their backgrounds weren't just a little different, they were polar opposites, and that shaped absolutely everything they would ever write. Let's take a look at the tail of the tape.
So in one corner, you have Count Leo Tolstoy. Born into the aristocracy, grew up on a massive country estate, you get the picture. A man of high society. And in the other corner, Fyodor Dostoevsky. A city kid from Moscow, the son of a low-level doctor. One saw Russia from the top down, the other from the bottom up.
And their paths just split dramatically when they were young men. In 1849, Dostoevsky gets arrested for radical political activity, is subjected to this horrifying mock execution. I mean, they literally made him think he was about to be shot, and then he's exiled to a Siberian labor camp for nearly a decade. A few years later, in 1854, a young Tolstoy is voluntarily joining the army to get a taste of the Crimean War.
So you can really boil it all down to this. Tolstoy's life, while it had its own challenges for sure, was basically one of privilege and choice. Dostoevsky's life, on the other hand, was defined by extreme hardship, poverty, and exile. These experiences weren't just part of their story, they became the actual raw material for their art.
So, how did all of that end up on the page? This is where the real battle begins. Were they even writing about the same world? Not really. One looked outward, at the huge structures that shape our lives. The other looked inward, right into the darkest corners of the human soul. You can really trace their differences to this one key distinction. For Tolstoy, the conflict is external. It's society, family, history beating down on you. For Dostoevsky, the conflict is all internal. It's about psychology, faith, free will. Tolstoy was chasing societal truth. Dostoevsky was hunting for psychological truth. Let's break down what that really means.
Yeah, you can think of Tolstoy as a kind of sociologist with a pen. In Anna Karenina, Anna is completely trapped by the institution of marriage and what society expects of her. In War and Peace, guys like Napoleon aren't these great men shaping history. They're just getting swept along by these massive, unstoppable historical waves. His characters are often victims of things way outside their control. But Dostoevsky, he's the total opposite. He's the psychologist. His characters aren't victims of society, they're victims of themselves. They're tortured by their own freedom, their own crazy thoughts, their own terrible choices. Raskolnikov in Crime and Punishment isn't a victim of poverty. He's a victim of this toxic idea that he plants in his own head. So here's the crucial difference. Tolstoy's characters are socially stifled by their class or their marriage. Dostoevsky's characters are mentally shackled by their own consciousness. One is a prison made by society. The other is a prison you build for yourself. Which brings us to the ultimate question, right? Who wins the showdown? Who's the greater writer? Well, to answer that, we can't just look at what critics said 100 years ago. We need to see who's speaking to us, right here, right now. So let's rephrase the question. In our modern world, with all its anxiety, isolation, and just information overload, which of these two Russian giants really has more to say? Let's turn to the judges' scorecard. You guys, the readers. The data from Goodreads, which pulls from millions of modern readers, is surprisingly clear. When you look at total ratings, just a measure of sheer readership, Dostoevsky actually comes out ahead. He's got nearly 400,000 more ratings than Tolstoy. But that's only part of the story. What's maybe even more telling is the average score from all those readers. It's 4.18 for Dostoevsky versus 4.07 for Tolstoy. Now, it's not a huge margin, but it does show that modern readers don't just read Dostoevsky more, they tend to connect with him just a little more deeply. So why is that? What's behind that connection? Well, it's probably Dostoevsky's focus on psychological chaos, his deep dives into human irrationality and our capacity to self-destruct. It just feels incredibly modern. He understood that logic alone can't fix our problems because, well, we aren't purely logical beings. He saw the darkness inside us, and in our complex world, that honesty really resonates. But hang on, here's the final twist. Maybe pitting them against each other like this kind of misses the point. Because while the data might give Dostoevsky a slight edge today, the real winner of this literary showdown isn't one author over the other. It's us, the readers, who get to experience both of their incredible worlds. Ultimately, their greatness isn't really found in their differences, but in what they shared. This relentless, unflinching commitment to honesty. They both held a mirror up to humanity and just refused to look away, no matter how ugly the reflection got. They told the raw truth. And that's why we're still reading them today. And that leaves us with a final question for you. Tolstoy and Dostoevsky each dedicated their lives to exploring a fundamental truth about our existence. So, what raw, uncomfortable, or vital truth about our world do you think matters most right now?